He never truly saw the woman he married. And he had no idea that while he stood sneering at her threshold, she was holding the keys to a life he couldn't even imagine. A life built with the devotion of a man who saw a queen beneath the ruin. This is the story of how a visit meant to humiliate became the moment karma came home. He never truly saw the woman he married. And he had no idea that while he stood sneering at her threshold, she was holding the keys to a life he couldn't even imagine. A life built with the devotion of a man who saw a queen beneath the ruin. This is the story of how a visit meant to humiliate became the moment karma came home. The creaky floorboards of the fourth-floor walk-up on Foster Avenue groaned under the weight of Nathan Holloway's $1,200 designer loafers. His eyes, pale gray and hard as flint, moved slowly across the room. An inventory of failure, and he relished every detail. The faded velvet couch, the chipped, mismatched mugs on a shelf, the faint scent of turpentine and oil paint, which he'd always detested. He used to call it the stench of failure. Nathan's gaze cut through the room like a cold blade, but Elena felt no crack in her calm. Beneath the serene exterior, a fierce storm raged, a mixture of long-buried hurt and a simmering fire of determination. Every scornful glance he cast was a reminder of years lost to belittlement, but also a spark fueling her relentless resolve. This wasn't failure. This was the birthplace of her rebirth. "Well, Elena," he said, his voice oozing that same smug condescension she remembered from 1,000 exhausting arguments. "It's charming." He let the word hang in the air, thick with judgment. Elena Brooks stood in the narrow kitchenette, both hands wrapped around a warm mug. She didn't offer him a drink. Her face stayed calm, serene even. But beneath the surface, a storm raged. It had been 6 months since their divorce was finalized. A year since he'd zipped up his monogrammed suitcases and walked out of their sleek Tribeca loft. He'd called her painting a delusion. Her refusal to become a submissive corporate wife, an unforgivable betrayal. "It's a studio, Nathan. It's exactly what I need," she replied, her voice steady. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Right, your art." He gestured vaguely toward a canvas draped with a white sheet. "Still chasing that little fantasy, I see. I figured by now you'd come to your senses, gotten a real job, maybe something in marketing. You were always great at organizing my events," he added, each word a dagger to old wounds. Over their 10 years of marriage, Nathan had chipped away at her self-worth. The paintings that once earned Elena a scholarship to Parsons had been boxed away in the attic. Her artist friends labeled distractions. Her dream of owning a gallery dismissed as a vanity project. He wanted a prize, a hostess, not a partner. Her dream of launching a cozy, independent art space had been scoffed at as a vanity project for the aimless and untalented. He had wanted a prize, someone polished to show off at dinners and fundraisers, not a collaborator, not an equal. "I'm happy here," she said, and the plain truth of it seemed to irritate him. "Happy," he echoed with a sneer, walking toward the window, which looked out at a cracked brick wall and an old metal fire escape. "Come on, Elena. Don't kid yourself. You were never any good at lying. You're happy with this? After everything you had? You remember the view from the loft? All of downtown at your feet?" "I remember the view, Nathan," she said calmly. "And I remember how it felt like a cage, even with all that space." He turned back toward her, his face adopting a faux look of concern. He had claimed his visit was to drop off a few lingering financial documents from their past life. All she needed to do was sign. The slim manila envelope was already on the counter. She had signed them minutes ago. Yet, he remained. Because he hadn't come to tie up loose ends. He'd come to gloat, to reaffirm the story he'd told himself and everyone else, that she was nothing without him. His new girlfriend, a 25-year-old influencer named Crystal, was probably downstairs in his brand-new charcoal Bentley, scrolling through her socials, oblivious to the mind games being played 4 floors above. Nathan had made sure Elena knew about her, too, tagging her in posts from yacht parties in Capri, rooftop lounges in London, and helicopter rides over Dubai. "Look what you gave up," those curated moments screamed. "Look at how much better my life is now." "A cage," he repeated, shaking his head. "A gilded cage, darling. Most women would kill for it. Designer everything. Private events, a last name that still turns heads. And now you've got this." His arms swept across the apartment, all exaggerated drama. the tortured artist routine. Isn't that a little tired, Elena? Her jaw tensed. She wanted to scream, to throw her mug across the room and order him out, to list every betrayal, every cold remark, every affair, every moment he'd chipped away at her spirit. She could barely draw breath, but she didn't lash out. Instead, she took another slow sip of tea. Nathan mistook her silence for surrender. A smug, victorious smirk crept onto his face. Look, I know things must be tight. If you need a little help, just until you get your feet under you, I could offer something. Think of it as a goodbye gift. Severance. He reached for his wallet, the gesture soaked in superiority. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen. Skylight installation confirmed for main studio. It's going to be stunning. Can't wait to see the look on your face. Home soon. A real smile, quiet and just for her, tugged at Elena's lips. She turned her gaze back to Nathan, to his pitiful gesture of generosity and the look of smug sympathy on his face. The fury and helplessness that once threatened to overwhelm her had settled into something colder, sharper, a quiet, unshakable steel. The urge to scream was gone now. In its place, something cooler, deeper, an almost serene sense of irony that only years of pain and perseverance could forge. No, thank you, Nathan, she said, her voice firm and clear. I'm doing just fine. He shrugged, tucking his wallet back into his coat, almost disappointed she hadn't bitten the bait. All right, suit yourself. Don't say I didn't offer. He moved to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. Good luck with your cozy little life, Elena, truly. The door shut behind him, and the fading rhythm of his expensive shoes echoing down the stairwell was the final note of a chapter long overdue for closure. At last, finally, Elena stood alone in the stillness of her studio. She looked around at the space Nathan had found so pitiful. To her, it wasn't sad. It wasn't failure. It was peace. It was her sanctuary, her workspace. A temporary rental where she was finishing the biggest project of her career, the one that had changed everything. She crossed the room to the easel, the one Nathan had dismissed without a second glance. With a steady breath, she pulled back the sheet. The canvas beneath exploded with life, sweeping strokes of indigo, bursts of fiery orange, veins of radiant gold leaf. A visual storm of loss and hope, of resurrection, a portrait of rebirth. It was the first of 12 commissioned pieces for the atrium of the new headquarters of the Ryland Foundation. She picked up her phone and typed a reply to JC. Can't wait either. The view from our window will be way better than that brick wall. She hit send, feeling the anticipation rise in her chest like sunlight at dawn. Nathan thought he'd been witnessing her ending. He didn't realize he'd only stumbled into the preface. This wasn't just a new love. This wasn't just a fresh start. It was a penthouse at the top of the Meridian Tower, a building Nathan's real estate firm had lost the development contract for 6 months ago. The irony? It was almost intoxicating. It hadn't always been this cold war of condescension and veiled contempt. Elena remembered how it all began, 10 years ago, when Nathan Holloway was a storm of charisma and ambition. He had been a junior associate at a powerhouse real estate firm, and she was a rising artist fresh out of art school, her portfolio pulsing with raw, undeniable energy. They met at a gallery opening in downtown LA, where he ignored every canvas on the walls and focused entirely on her. Your passion, he had told her, eyes locked. You talk about color the way I talk about closing million-dollar deals. He whispered it over champagne as if it were prophecy. And he meant it, at least in the moment. He chased her with single-minded intensity, sending flowers to her studio, showing up at her pop-ups, asking endless questions about her work. He bought one of her early pieces, a misty seascape of the Mendocino coastline, and hung it above the fireplace in his bachelor condo. It would be the only painting of hers he ever purchased. Caught up in the rush of new love, Elena mistook his obsession for loyalty. His drive felt magnetic, his ambition infectious. She wanted in on the ride. When he proposed a year later, with a diamond so massive it looked out of place on her calloused hands, she said yes, believing with all her heart that they were building something together. His empire in finance, hers in art. The illusion began to fray almost as soon as the wedding ended. Their new home, a grand historic brownstone in Pacific Heights, had been Nathan's choice. It's an investment, he'd insisted when she suggested a bright industrial loft downtown with real studio space. It projects success. The attic became her art room. It had one window and terrible insulation, frigid in winter, unbearable in summer. Still, she tried to make it work. But when she began painting seriously again, Nathan complained about the smell. "We're supposed to host clients here, Elena," he said one night, wrinkling his nose. "You want the place smelling like a hardware store?" He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His tone was enough to shut down the conversation. Eventually, her easel was folded up, her canvases stacked and tucked away. Her art became what he referred to as the hobby. "How's the hobby going?" he'd ask absently on his way to the gym, not waiting for a reply. "You should take a break from your hobby and come to the club tonight," he'd say, as if it were a treat. The friends who had once been her lifeline, painters, illustrators, creatives of every stripe, were slowly cut from their social calendar. He found them off. Her closest friend, a bold ceramic artist named Bryn, he called loud. A former professor from Parsons, a mentor and nationally recognized painter, he dismissed as irrelevant. One by one, they were replaced with Nathan's world. Investment analysts with gleaming watches and their polished bored wives. Women talked about charity committees and luxury travel with the same fierce urgency Wall Street traders reserved for mergers. Elena found herself playing the part of Mrs. Holloway, hosting seamless dinner parties, serving on the right non-profit boards, and dressing in the soft, expensive neutrals Nathan preferred. She was drowning in silk and diamonds. Each flawless gathering was a performance, a meticulously scripted scene in a life that felt increasingly like a gilded cage. The laughter around the table was polite, but the isolation beneath it was suffocating. Elena's heart beat quietly beneath the layers of silk and crystal, yearning for the freedom her spirit craved. Yes, the cage was gilded, but the bars were cold, rigid, and unforgiving. The arguments began, subtle at first. He'd forget to mention a business dinner until an hour before, expecting her to appear perfectly polished and smiling. He'd belittle her opinions on politics or design in front of his friends, brushing it off with a patronizing chuckle. "She's an artist," he'd say. "You know how emotional they can be." But the rupture, the one that signaled the beginning of the end, came over a gallery. An old college friend had opened a modest space in Silver Lake and offered Elena a solo show. It was everything she'd been dreaming of, a chance to step back into her voice, to reclaim herself. She was elated. Working in secret in that sweltering attic, she painted late into the night, pouring years of frustration and hunger onto every canvas. When she finally told Nathan, 2 months before the opening, he didn't even look up from his tablet. "A show?" he asked. "In Silver Lake?" His distaste was unmistakable. "Elena, my clients are in Beverly Hills, not some back-alley hipster haven. What are people going to think?" "I don't care what they think," she replied, her voice steady. "This isn't for them, it's for me. It's who I am." That got his attention. He lifted his eyes, cold, sharp. "Who you are is my wife. And my wife does not hang her little canvases in some dingy downtown gallery like we're hurting for money. It's humiliating. Cancel it." No. It was the first time she had refused him so directly, so absolutely. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice flat. "I said no. I'm doing the show." His eyes darkened. He rose from the couch, his 6-foot frame suddenly imposing. "You're throwing away everything I've built for us." He growled. "Your little paintings, they're a liability. This selfishness could ruin everything." "Your reputation," she snapped. "That's what this is really about, isn't it?" Her voice was shaking now, but not from fear. "What about my life, Nathan? My purpose? You've drained every ounce of it out of me for the last 10 years. This isn't about your name or your clients. It's about control. You can't stand the idea of me having something that's mine. Something you can't put a dollar sign on." He didn't raise his voice. He did something worse. He laughed, that same hollow, scornful laugh she'd hear again years later in her tiny Foster Avenue studio. "My God," he said, shaking his head. "You actually think you're some kind of hidden genius? You're a bored housewife with a hobby, Elena?" He stepped closer, voice dripping with contempt. "Without me, you'd be living in a dump. Just like that pathetic gallery you're so obsessed with." That was the moment. The love didn't just fade away. It died suddenly and violently, leaving behind a hollow space where Elena's heart once lived. It was a brutal, shattering end to a dream she had once believed in fiercely, a dream now reduced to cold ashes. That emptiness was terrifying, yet strangely freeing, for it cleared the way for something new to grow from the ruins. For the first time, she saw Nathan for who he really was, a deeply insecure man whose entire identity depended on status, money, and the image of a perfect, compliant wife. Her independence wasn't just inconvenient to him, it was a direct threat to his fragile sense of self. Elena went ahead with the show. Nathan didn't attend. His absence was a statement, and everyone in their circle noticed. The show was a modest success. She sold several pieces, received a glowing mention in a popular local art blog, and most importantly, felt the spark of her true self begin to flicker again. That was enough. A week after the show closed, she told Nathan she wanted a divorce. He was stunned, then enraged. He couldn't understand why she would choose to leave the perfect life he'd provided. The divorce was brutal. He fought every point with expensive lawyers, trying to paint her as unstable, ungrateful, and reckless. He wanted to leave her with nothing, hoping to force her back into his orbit. But Elena had an ace hidden up her sleeve. Years ago, Nathan had arrogantly let her keep her premarital artwork. What he didn't know was that her mentor, a respected painter named Hansen, had quietly been buying her work under a pseudonym for years, believing in her talent. She sold enough of those pieces to secure modest capital. Enough to live on, rent the Foster Avenue studio, and rebuild her career. Leaving the brownstone with nothing but her personal belongings and her canvases was terrifying and liberating. Nathan's parting words echoed in her mind. "You'll be back," he sneered. "You'll crawl back when you realize the real world doesn't care about your little paintings." Now standing in the very studio he had mocked, Elena thought about those words. He was wrong. The real world was waiting, and one very important person in that world didn't just care about her paintings. He saw his own soul reflected in them. 6 months into her new life, Elena was a study in controlled chaos. Her days blurred into cheap coffee, long hours, and the exhilarating freedom to create. The Foster Avenue studio was her cocoon. She poured every ounce of pain, anger, and cautious hope from her post-divorce life onto her canvases. Her style had evolved, bolder, more abstract, raw with emotions she'd kept locked away for a decade. She painted for herself, and her work had never been more honest. Small commissions and online sales supported her just enough to pay rent and buy supplies. It was worlds away from the limitless corporate credit card she'd once held, but it was hers. Every dollar earned by her talent and grit. Then came an opportunity. A simple email with a subject line that made her heart skip. The commission inquiry came from the Ryland Foundation. Everyone knew the name Julian Ryland. He was a titan of the tech world, a self-made billionaire who had transformed the landscape of renewable energy. Unlike the old money elite Nathan surrounded himself with, Ryland was celebrated as a visionary, a forward thinker. He was famously private, a stark contrast to Nathan's relentless social climbing and flashy philanthropy. The Ryland Foundation was renowned for its massive investments in art and science. The email was from the foundation's art director, a woman named Anna Sharma. She had seen Elena's work at that modest Silver Lake Gallery show, the very show that had just closed. Since then, Anna had been following her progress online. The foundation was searching for a single artist to create a massive, multi-panel installation for the triple-height lobby of their new global headquarters, a stunning architectural marvel on the waterfront called Meridian Tower. They wanted a statement piece that symbolized renewal, innovation, and the power of human connection. They wanted her. The meeting wasn't held in a formal boardroom, but in Elena's own studio. Anna arrived first, a stylish, articulate woman who spoke about Elena's work with such reverence that Elena blushed. 5 minutes later, Julian Ryland himself walked through the door. He was nothing like she had imagined. No entourage, no arrogance. Tall, dressed simply in a gray sweater and dark jeans, he exuded quiet, unshakable confidence. His warm hazel eyes held genuine curiosity as he looked around the studio, not with judgment, but with respect. "Elena Brooks," he said, his voice deeper than she expected. "Anna has been telling me for months that you're the only artist for this project. Seeing your work in person, I finally understand why." He didn't glance at the worn furniture or cramped space. He focused on the art. He moved from canvas to canvas, studying each one intently. He asked about her technique, her choice of colors, the meaning behind a particular brushstroke. He wasn't just being polite, he was genuinely engaged. He saw the story in her work. "There's real passion in your pieces," he said, stopping before a canvas dominated by stormy grays, pierced by a defiant slash of crimson. "It's like you're fighting your way out of darkness, certain the light is just beyond." Elena felt a lump rise in her throat. "That's exactly it," she whispered. In that moment, she felt more seen than she had in 10 years of marriage. The commission was hers. The budget was staggering, beyond anything she had ever dreamed of. It afforded her the best materials, financial security, and most importantly, validation of her life's work on a global stage. Over the next several months, Julian became a familiar presence in Elena's studio. He'd stop by after work, sometimes with Anna, sometimes alone, to check on the progress of the 12 massive panels. Their conversations meandered from art to technology, from philosophy to their personal histories. He shared stories of his own humble beginnings, the son of a librarian and a schoolteacher, and the relentless drive that had built his empire. In those moments, Elena glimpsed the man behind the success, grounded, thoughtful, and quietly driven by more than just ambition. His openness invited her to reveal parts of herself she'd long kept guarded, and their shared vulnerabilities forged a bond beyond the surface. He was captivated by Elena's creative process, seeing surprising parallels between how a painter layers color on canvas and how a programmer builds a complex algorithm. He valued the very things Nathan had dismissed. Her passion wasn't a hobby, it was a superpower. Her independence wasn't selfishness, it was strength. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, he found her staring at a finished panel, exhausted but triumphant. "It's done," she whispered. He stood beside her, looking over the breathtaking collection that would soon captivate thousands of visitors each day. "It's a masterpiece, Elena." Then, turning to her, his expression grew serious. "This project is coming to an end," he said softly, "and I find I'm not happy about that." Her heart quickened. "Me neither." "I'm not just talking about the art," Julian continued. "I'm talking about our conversations. I'm talking about you." There were no games, no pretense, only honesty. He told her he was captivated by her resilience, her talent, and the quiet fire he saw burning within her. He hadn't felt such a connection in years. When he asked if he could take her to dinner, not as a patron, but as a man interested in a woman, she said yes without hesitation. Their relationship blossomed quietly, away from the public eye. It was a courtship between equals. They found solace in each other's company, two people who had built their own worlds, now wanting to share them. He loved the Foster Avenue studio, calling it her creation chamber. He never once suggested she change or give it up. 3 months later, he proposed. It was on a private trip to the Amalfi Coast, on a balcony overlooking the sea at sunset. The ring wasn't a flashy rock meant to signify ownership. It was an elegant, custom-designed piece with a rare sea-green sapphire, one that perfectly matched her eyes. "I don't want to change you, Elena," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I just want to be the one who gets to watch you conquer the world." When they returned to New York, he showed her the apartment he had bought. It was the Celestial Suite, the sprawling duplex penthouse atop the Meridian Tower. The very building where her art would be displayed in the lobby. A palace in the sky, with panoramic city views, a private terrace, and most importantly, a massive glass-walled room with soaring ceilings and perfect northern light. "Your new studio," Julian had said, squeezing her hand gently. "A much better view than a brick wall." Elena cried, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of his love and respect. Tears fell silently, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and the bittersweet weight of all she had endured. This moment, so simple yet profound, was the culmination of years of struggle, resilience, and quiet defiance. It was proof that she was no longer confined by the limits others tried to impose on her. This wasn't a cage, it was a launch pad. Nathan's world and Julian's world were on a collision course. And Elena found herself at the epicenter, holding all the power. The stage was set for the final karmic showdown. Why keep the Foster Avenue studio? Why allow Nathan to walk in and mock what he saw as her failure? It wasn't a sentimental choice. It was a calculated legal strategy, advised by a team of lawyers far more formidable than the ones Nathan had hired against her. The loose end that had brought Nathan to her door was a lingering tax liability from a failed real estate venture he had started during their marriage. Without her full knowledge, he had made her a minority partner in the LLC. When the venture collapsed, he had used slick accounting tactics to shift most of the losses and the subsequent tax burdens onto her, legally ensnaring her. His goal during the divorce was to use this leverage to threaten her with a massive IRS debt unless she agreed to a paltry settlement. Elena's divorce lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Susan, called it financial abuse, pure and simple. They fought it, but the legal complexities meant a final resolution was still pending. After Elena secured the Ryland Commission, Susan's advice was clear and unequivocal. Do not change your lifestyle. Not yet. Nathan is watching you. He follows you on social media, Susan warned. He has friends who report back to him. He believes you're struggling. Let him believe that, Susan said. His entire case against you is based on the idea that you have no resources. The moment he finds out you are connected to Julian Ryland, she continued, his strategy will change. He'll try to argue the relationship started before the divorce was finalized, to demand a bigger settlement. He'll get nastier. Let's starve the beast. We wait for him to make his final move, based on the false information he has. So Elena maintained her quiet life. She and Julian were masters of discretion. They dined in private rooms, traveled on his personal jet, and spent their time together either at his heavily secured estate outside the city or in the magnificent but still undecorated penthouse. To the outside world, she was still Elena Brooks, the struggling artist in a fourth-floor walk-up. The Foster Avenue studio became a strategic asset, a stage for the final act. Julian, to his immense credit, understood this completely. He found a certain satisfaction in the plan. He's a bully who relies on the perception of power, Julian said one evening as they reviewed legal documents in his vast library. All we're doing is letting him walk into a room where he thinks he's the giant, without realizing the floor is about to give way. Nathan's visit was exactly the move they had been waiting for. The signing of those documents was the final piece of the puzzle. His condescending offer of severance pay? The cherry on top, a perfect testament to his arrogance. Something Susan would be delighted to hear about. The day after Nathan's visit, Elena met with Susan. He took the bait, Elena said, recounting every detail of the conversation, including his pitying remarks and his cash offer. Susan grinned, a sharp, shark-like smile. Perfect, she said. We have his signed affidavit from the divorce proceedings stating you have no significant career prospects. And now we have a fresh, unsolicited visit where he confirms his belief in your financial ruin. His lawyers are about to file a final motion assigning the full tax debt to you. They're walking right into the trap. The plan was simple. Nathan's lawyers would file the motion. Susan's team would respond, not just with a refusal, but with a comprehensive dossier detailing Elena's new financial reality. The contract for the Ryland Commission, sales of her previous works, and a sworn statement from the Ryland Foundation's CFO. Simultaneously, they would file a countersuit against Nathan for fraudulent misrepresentation and financial abuse during the marriage, seeking damages. He thinks he's cornering a mouse, Susan said, tapping her pen on the thick folder containing Elena's case. He's about to find out he's cornered a lioness, and her mate owns the whole damn jungle. The deception was taking its toll on Elena. She hated the secrecy. She wanted to shout her happiness from the rooftops. She wanted to post a photo of her and Julian, their faces bright with love, just to wipe that smug look off Nathan's face. Julian sensed her exhaustion that evening in the penthouse. He had a surprise for her. He led her into a room designated as her new studio. In the center of the vast space, on a professional easel, was a small framed painting. It was the moody landscape of the Mendocino coast, the first painting he had ever bought from her. Elena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "How did you track this down?" Julian explained softly. "I found the broker he sold it to a few years ago. Nathan offloaded it as part of a package of unwanted assets when he redecorated the brownstone. He probably got a few hundred for it." "I believe it belongs here," Julian said, "a reminder of where you started and the talent that was always there, just waiting for the world to see." Tears streamed down Elena's face as she looked from the painting to the man who had brought it back to her. He hadn't just given her a future. He was helping her reclaim her past. He thought it was worthless, she whispered. He was wrong about a lot of things, Julian said, wrapping his arms around her. And he's about to get a masterclass in just how wrong he was. The conversation shifted. Are you ready for this to be over? Julian asked, more than anything. Then let's finish it, he said. Susan has everything she needs, but I think there's one more thing we need to do. He came to your space to humiliate you. It seems only fair the final blow is delivered on your home turf. A plan began to take shape, a final, dramatic confrontation to be staged right where it all began, in the modest apartment on Foster Avenue. The next 2 weeks were a calm before the storm. Alina's legal team, led by the formidable Susan, prepared their bombshell response. Julian's team quietly gathered ironclad supporting documentation. Meanwhile, Nathan, blissfully unaware, pressed his advantage. He started with an email dripping with false sympathy. Subject: Thinking of you, Alina. I can't stop thinking about our conversation. Seeing you in that tiny apartment genuinely concerns me. I know you're proud, but pride doesn't pay the bills. The outstanding tax liability from the Northwood property deal needs to be settled. My lawyers advise me that, given your current financial situation, the courts will likely see it as my burden to bear. But it will be a long and messy fight, costing us both dearly. I have a proposal. I will assume the full debt, no strings attached. All I ask is that you sign a final waiver, acknowledging this settles all financial matters between us, past, present, and future. It's the clean break we should have had. Let me do this one last thing for you. Think of it as a final act of kindness. Elena read the email aloud to Julian and Susan during a conference call. Susan let out a dry laugh. An act of kindness? He's trying to get you to sign away your rights to sue him for pennies. He's terrified that even if you're broke, some pro bono lawyer might take your case and expose his fraud. He wants to lock you in a box and throw away the key. Julian's voice was cold. He's trying to buy a clear conscience for the price of a tax burden he created. It's pathetic. What's our next move? Elena asked. We let him simmer, Susan advised. Don't respond. Your silence will make him nervous. He'll get sloppy. He'll push harder. Susan was right. A week of silence passed. Then came the official letter from Nathan's lawyers. It was aggressive, demanding, and set a tight deadline. It threatened immediate legal action to assign the full debt to her, citing her lack of cooperation and unstable finances. This was the official move. They'd been waiting for it. Susan's team immediately filed their counter-motion. The legal wheels were turning, but it would take a few days for the paperwork to reach Nathan's lawyers. That gave them a small window. The final piece fell into place when Nathan, agitated by Alina's silence and confident in his position, made one last arrogant move. He sent a text directly to Alina. I'm trying to help you, Alina. I've sent a final offer through my lawyers. If you don't sign it, I'll have no choice but to let them do their job. I'm coming by your studio tomorrow at 3 p.m. with a courier. You can sign it right there, and this can all be over. Don't be foolish. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she read the message. Her breath caught in her throat, a mix of fear and fierce determination swirling within her. This wasn't just another message. It was the challenge she had been waiting for. The moment when all her careful plans would either come to fruition or unravel. The weight of the past years pressed on her shoulders, but she stood unyielding. This was it. The confrontation he was forcing was exactly the one she and Julian had planned. He's delivering his own execution order, Julian said grimly. When she asked, Are you sure you're ready for this? Face to face? Elena took a deep breath, her gaze falling on the small Mendocino painting, now hanging in her magnificent new studio. She thought of the years she'd been made to feel small, of her dreams dismissed as mere hobbies. I'm ready, she said, her voice steely with resolve. He deserves to see my face when his world comes crashing down. The plan was set. Julian would not be there at first. This had to be her victory. He would arrive only at the very end, to witness and to escort her away from the ruins of her past life, for good. On the day of the meeting, Alina dressed with purpose. Not in a power suit or designer clothes. She wore her paint-splattered jeans, a simple black t-shirt, and her favorite worn leather boots. She was the artist Nathan had tried to erase in the very studio he had despised. At 2:45 p.m., she sat on the second-hand velvet couch. The room was neat but still carried the scent of turpentine, the smell of her freedom. The air was thick with anticipation. She wasn't nervous. She was a conductor, waiting to bring the symphony of consequences to its crashing crescendo. At 2:55 p.m., her phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "I'm 5 minutes away." The documents had been officially filed with the court and served to Nathan's lead counsel at 2:30 p.m. He didn't know it yet, but he was already lost. This was just the epilogue. "I love you, Elena." "I love you too, Showtime." Right on cue at 3 p.m. sharp, she heard heavy, confident footsteps on the stairs. They were followed by a lighter clicking sound. High heels. He had brought company. The audacity was breathtaking. The knock on the door was sharp, impatient. Elena stood, smoothed down her t-shirt, and walked to the door. She turned the knob, her heart steady, her mind clear. It was time to let the ghost of her past in, for the very last time. The door swung open to reveal Nathan Holloway in all his bespoke suited glory. Clinging to his arm was a stunningly beautiful young woman with impossibly long blonde hair and a Chanel bag. Tiffany, the Instagram model, in the flesh. She looked Elena up and down, then around the small apartment, her perfectly glossed lips curling into a barely concealed sneer. "Nathan," Elena said, voice steady, betraying nothing. Nathan began, his tone magnanimous, as if he were a king visiting a peasant's hovel. "This is Tiffany. I thought it best to have a witness. And this," he gestured to a nervously standing man in uniform a step behind them, "is the courier with the settlement papers." Elena stepped back, allowing them to enter her space. The room suddenly felt very small, crowded with Nathan's ego and the scent of Tiffany's expensive perfume. Nathan placed his briefcase on the small coffee table with a decisive thud. "Let's make this quick. I have a reservation at Per Se." He looked at Tiffany with a smug smile. "Tiffany's never been. It's like impossible to get a table." Tiffany added, her voice a high-pitched drawl, "Wow, my little nephew paints stuff like that at daycare. So cute." Elena ignored her. Her focus was entirely on Nathan. "It is Nathan," he said, pulling out a thick document, simple, straightforward. "You sign here acknowledging you have no further claims. I sign here taking on the full Northwood tax debt. The courier notarizes it, and we're done." "I'm being incredibly generous, Elena. My lawyers think I'm insane." He slid the document across the table toward her. "Don't overthink it. It's the best deal you're ever gonna get. It's your lifeline." Elena did not look at the papers. She looked Nathan directly in the eyes. "Generous, Nathan?" she said slowly, her voice filled with quiet fury. "Is that what you call saddling your ex-wife with a debt you fraudulently created, then offering to take it back in exchange for immunity?" Nathan's smile faltered for a moment. "Let's not get into semantics. This is a simple business transaction." "No, let's," Elena said, her voice rising with strength. "Let's talk about the hobby. My art. You called it a delusional pipe dream. You said I'd come crawling back. You stood in this very room and laughed at my cozy little life." "I was trying to be realistic," he said, growing defensive. "No," she shot back. "You were being cruel." "And you," he said, voice hardening, "were being blind." "You've always been blind, Nathan. You see price tags, but you have no concept of value." Tiffany looked nervously between them. "Nathan, maybe we should just go," Elena commanded, her gaze locked on Nathan. She should hear this. Nathan let out an exasperated sigh. "What's the point of this, Elena? Are you going to throw a tantrum and refuse to sign? Who do you think that hurts? It only hurts you. You have nothing, no assets, no income to speak of. Any court in the country will side with me. Now, sign the paper." This was the moment, the peak of his arrogance, the final damning statement. Elena smiled, a slow, brilliant smile that did not reach her eyes. Beneath that smile was a quiet storm, a lifetime of battles distilled into a single, unyielding defiance. Every word he spoke was a mirror reflecting his desperation, and she was the calm eye of that storm, unshaken and resolute. "It's funny you should mention courts, Nathan." She pulled out her phone and placed it on the table. She tapped the screen. A deep, clear voice filled the small apartment. It was Julian's voice on speaker. She had just answered. "Hi, honey," the voice said. "Just wanted to let you know I'm downstairs. Also, Anna just called. The lighting test for your installation in the lobby was a success. It looks magnificent. And the final payment from the foundation, the 7-figure one, should hit your account tomorrow." Nathan froze. His face went pale. He stared at the phone as if it were a snake. Tiffany's jaw dropped. Who? Who is that?" Nathan stammered. Elena's smile widened. "Also Nathan," she said, "on the subject of lawyers, mine's a woman named Susan Leal from W.T. Tell Lipton. You may have heard of them. They're a step above your guys. We filed a countermotion this afternoon. It details my income from the Ryland Foundation Commission over the past 6 months. It also includes a motion to sue you for financial abuse and fraud. I imagine your lawyer's email is pinging right about now." Nathan looked utterly bewildered. "Ryland? Julian Ryland? What are you talking about?" Just then, there was a knock on the open door. Julian Ryland stepped inside. He wasn't dressed for per se. Casual but impeccably tailored jacket. His eyes fixed on Nathan with an expression of cold fury. The courier's eyes went wide. Tiffany let out a small gasp, instantly recognizing the famous billionaire. Nathan stared, his mind visibly short-circuiting as he connected the dots. The voice on the phone. The man in the doorway. The Ryland Foundation. The Meridian Tower. The biggest lost bid of his firm. "You," he whispered, looking at Elena with dawning horror. Julian walked calmly into the room and stood beside Elena, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. He looked down at Nathan, who was still seated, suddenly small and insignificant. "Nathan," Julian said, voice dangerously quiet, "you came into my fiancé's studio to intimidate her. You mocked her life's work. That work now adorns the lobby of my global headquarters. You tried to saddle her with a fraudulent debt. My legal team, the best in the world, is going to dismantle you for that. Not just for the fraud, but for the harassment." Julian then glanced at the settlement papers on the table. He picked them up without even reading, and tore the thick document in half with one clean rip. He dropped the torn pieces on the floor at Nathan's feet. "This negotiation is over," Julian stated firmly. Nathan was speechless. He opened and closed his mouth like a fish, but no sound came out. His entire world, built on a foundation of perceived superiority, had just been leveled by a quiet woman in paint-stained jeans and the one man in New York he could never compete with. Tiffany began backing toward the door, her face a mixture of terror and awe. I should go. I'll get an Uber." She practically fled, leaving Nathan alone amidst the ruins. Elena looked at her ex-husband, not with hate, but with a strange, detached pity. He wasn't a monster. He was just a hollow man. "The view from my new studio is much better than the one from the brownstone, Nathan," she said softly. "You look so small from up here." She then turned, took Julian's hand, and walked out of the Foster Avenue studio for the last time, without looking back. She left Nathan sitting there, surrounded by the torn papers of his generous offer. The ghost of his own success haunted the tiny room he had so thoroughly misjudged. The aftermath was not swift, but it was total. Nathan Holloway's world didn't just crack. It atomized. The lawsuit Elena filed was a masterpiece of legal devastation. Susan Leal and Julian's in-house counsel worked in tandem, unearthing every shady deal, every shell corporation, every instance where Nathan had leveraged Elena's name and credit without her full consent. The Northwood tax fraud was just the tip of the iceberg. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a public trial against a beloved billionaire and his artist fiancé, Nathan's lawyers advised him to settle. He was financially obliterated. He had to sell the Pacific Heights brownstone to cover legal fees and the massive settlement he paid Elena. She immediately donated the entire settlement to a charity supporting female artists. He lost his Bentley, his memberships to exclusive clubs, and his standing in the real estate community. News of his fraudulent dealings and humiliating divorce spread like wildfire. Through the very circles he had fought so hard to dominate, he was no longer a player. He became a cautionary tale. The final blow came when his firm, seeking to distance itself from the scandal, terminated his partnership. Tiffany, of course, was long gone. Her social media feed quickly pivoted from photos with Nathan to vague inspirational quotes about cutting out negative energy. Nathan Holloway, the man who had defined himself by success, was left with nothing but the truth of his own character. Elena never saw him again. She didn't need to. Her focus was entirely on the future. a future brighter than she had ever imagined. 6 months after that final confrontation, the Meridian Tower held its grand opening gala. The event was the talk of New York. At the heart of the soaring, cathedral-like lobby was Elena's installation. The 12 massive panels were a symphony of color and emotion, alive. Under the carefully designed lighting, they captivated every visitor. The New York Times called the installation a monumental work of breathtaking power and optimism, and hailed Elena Brooks as a major new voice in American art. That night, Elena stood on a balcony high in the tower, looking down at the glittering city. She wore a stunning sea-green gown that matched her engagement ring. Julian stood by her side, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. They weren't looking at the partygoers or the press. They were looking at the art. Her art. "Do you remember what you told me the first time you came to my studio?" Elena asked softly, over the distant murmur of the crowd. "You said my work looked like I was fighting my way out of the dark, certain the light was there." "I remember," Julian said, eyes full of love. "And look at you now. You're not just in the light, you're creating it." She leaned her head on his shoulder, a profound peace settling over her. It was a peace earned through years of struggle, heartbreak, and unwavering resilience. A peace that came from finally being seen, not just for her success, but for the woman she had fought to become. Her happiness wasn't about money or fame. It wasn't even about Nathan's downfall. It was about this: being seen, being valued, being loved for exactly who she was. The penthouse, the acclaim, the security, they weren't the prize. They were beautiful byproducts of reclaiming her soul. Nathan had tried to cage her in gold. She had built a palace in the sky instead. He had laughed at her simple apartment, unaware that from her new home she had a view of the entire world. A world she was ready to paint in every color imaginable. She was no longer Elena Holloway, the accessory, nor Elena Brooks, the struggling artist. She was Elena Brooks, the woman who learned true wealth isn't something you own, but something you become. From up here, the view was perfect. Elena's story isn't just about revenge. It's a powerful reminder that the greatest success is living authentically. Nathan saw her life through the lens of money and status, and it blinded him. Julian saw her through the lens of passion and character, and it showed him everything. In the end, the simple apartment Nathan mocked was the very place Elena forged the weapons of her victory, her art and her self-worth. She didn't need to tear him down. His arrogance did that for her. She just had to rise. So the story is over, our wonderful friends. Are you still here with me? If you've made it all the way to this point, then there's something about Elena's journey that's touched your heart words alone can't fully capture. And now, just for a moment, let's look at it together. Not as a distant tale, but as a mirror for our own lives. It's a powerful reminder that no matter how much the world tries to define us by what we lose or what we appear to have, true strength comes from within. Like the wise words from Heraclitus say, the soul is dyed the color of its thoughts. What we believe about ourselves shapes our reality. Elena's story teaches us that even when the world tries to cage us in gold or dismiss our dreams as folly, our true wealth lies in our courage, our resilience, and the authenticity we bring to life. She didn't need to tear down those who doubted her. Her rise was her rebellion, a testament that sometimes the loudest victory is the quiet one within. So if this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you to keep fighting for your own truth, please like, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to our channel. We read every single comment because your thoughts matter. Let's grow and heal together. Because living authentically is the greatest success we can ever achieve.